hills of Los Angeles, and those high nights, she goes to California, oh, California.
What you say about Los Angeles?
LA got the people saying,
You're listening to Corner of the Galaxy on cornerofthegalaxy.com. It's time for another episode of Corner of the Galaxy from the Box, the show that gets you behind the scenes of the LA Galaxy and into the minds of soccer reporters and MLS experts. Your hosts for the day are Corner of the Galaxy's Josh Guesman and LA Times soccer reporter Kevin Baxter. Let's start the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Corner of the Galaxy from the Box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. I'm your host, Josh Guesman, coming to you on a wonderful, I would say Monday night. We are going to record this podcast on Monday night, which is kind of fun for us. But if you're listening to this, it's probably Tuesday morning already because we're not releasing this until Tuesday morning. That means we have some breaking news and some fun stuff to talk about today. And we're going to jump right into it. A bunch of things to talk about. Coaching announcements coming up. Christian Pavone, AJ De La Garza, Villafana, a whole bunch of little things in there as well. All right. To help me talk about all this, the man, the myth, the legend, Kevin the Panda Baxter. Kev, how's it going, buddy?
Hey, you know that open, I had 2 birthdays and an anniversary during that thing. Wow, that was long.
I was going to say, I like to, it's 2021. We needed a little throwback. Speaking of coaching announcements, there's a throwback component to the coaching announcement. I feel like, having said all of that stuff, it makes 100% sense that we go back and do one of our more popular intros. And maybe see if 2021 needs that intro a little bit this year. So this is a throwback.
Did you get the technical problems fixed? The technical problems that delayed this podcast until Tuesday?
Do you think our listeners are getting smart to the fact that we use the word technical difficulties for some of this stuff whenever we have to delay something for a little bit because of announcements?
Well, you said coaching announcement. Is there a coaching announcement? Did that happen?
Well, technically, as we're recording, no, it hasn't happened. Oh. But as we're releasing the podcast, yes, it has happened. And why don't you tell everybody? I know it's going to come to a shock and a surprise.
I hope everyone's sitting down.
Yeah, Caleb Porter, everybody. No, it's not. It's not Caleb Porter. I thought that would still be fun. Can the Galaxy?
Speaking of throwbacks, it's Guillermo.
Yeah. Can the Galaxy actually announce a head coach without the Lakers playing, and having fans? Is that where they can sit in the stands?
No, the Lakers are playing. There's just no one there. They could go. Dan Beckerman and Chris Kine could go sit courtside with whoever they want, as long as they're 6 feet apart and wear a mask and no one else is in the building.
Yes. So, I mean, maybe they already did. Maybe that's what happened.
If it's someone sitting courtside, maybe it's LeBron James. It's going to be the new LeBron James, the new manager of your LA Galaxy.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, you know what? At this point, anything would go. So why don't you tell everybody what has just happened? Being if we release this, it just happened.
Greg Vanney is the new coach of the LA Galaxy.
Woo! Shocker, yeah. I say, Kevin. I
hope everyone's sitting down. And the throwback component, of course, he is 6th on the all-time franchise list for games played, 193 regular season games played. I think it's like 230 with the playoffs. He was on the original LA Galaxy roster. Well, he was on the original team, but he was loaned out for the first 2 games of that season. He came back. He wound up tying for the club lead in games played. He played in 29 games that season. That was a team, the 1996 team, which made it to the MLS Cup final and lost. That team had 5 players that went on to become MLS head coaches and 3 others that went on to become assistant coaches. Greg Vanney is one of them. Others on that team that went on to become head coaches, Kurt Anoffel, Robin Fraser. It's quite a team.
Yeah, it is. And it was, I was telling my wife about this, which is always interesting because I think she feigns interest. And whenever I get excited about something, she's sort of like, yeah, okay, that's cool. But I was talking about Greg Vanney and she's like, who exactly is that? I'm like, well, he used to play for the Galaxy back in the day. She goes, they have a history of doing that, don't they? And I said, well, I mean, to be fair, the LA Galaxy have been one of the, star franchises since the beginning of this league. They've been around for 25, now 26 years. There's a lot of players who have gone through there, and some of them turned out to be smart, like Greg Berhalter, like Robin Fraser, like Curt Onalfo, like Greg Vanney. Yeah, Pat Noonan. I mean, you can go through a whole list of those. And whenever you talk about the godfather of U.S. soccer and Bruce Arena, being there as well, there's a lot of Bruce disciples that have sort of filtered through the league as well. So almost any time you talk about anything in Major League Soccer, Kevin, I feel like you have the ability to talk about, the LA Galaxy and having a connection somewhere.
Well, and that's why the Greg Vanney coming back is so important. I mean, we know about the phenomenal success he's had in Toronto, takes over a team that had never had a winning record, and in his third full season, they win the only treble in MLS history. They win the Canada Championship. They won league title and Supporters Shield. They won MLS Cup and Supporters Shield. Only time it's ever happened in MLS history. So he's had, phenomenal success there in Toronto. But the foundation for that was laid here with the Galaxy. The years that he played here. He also was an assistant coach under Robin Fraser for 2 years at Chivas USA, and then went to Toronto first as assistant general manager, and then took over at the end of that first season as coach. But he talked about the importance, when I spoke to him today, Monday, he talked about the importance of coming back to LA and what it meant to come back to the Galaxy and try to restore what the Galaxy once was. I mean, his memory of the Galaxy, he did play on that 2008 team that was dismal, Bruce Arena's first half season here. But he talked about, his memories of the Galaxy and what it meant to the league. He said the Galaxy are the most important club in MLS. They're the ones that have set the bar so high. They're the club everybody else wants to be. Even now, the Galaxy are still, the big dogs. And Greg Vanney wants to come back and restore that. And he was very clear about the fact he knows that this is a project. He had a project in Toronto.
Right.
He doesn't think it's going to happen overnight. He said the importance right now is to build a foundation, build some stability, get players to the point where they have chemistry with one another. And that was, for me, that was really refreshing to hear, because we know that in the last 4 years, the worst 4-year stretch in Galaxy history, they've gone through 66 players, 4 coaches. Only one coach has lasted an entire season. They've had their star players, with the exception of Zlatan, who was only here 1+ years, almost 2 seasons.
Right.
But you got Pavone and Antuna and Fabio Alvarez. Those were all loan players that were gone, after a short period. So Vanney's talking about, look, this is going to take 2 and 3 and maybe 4 years, but we have to build a foundation. We don't want to be a flash in the pan. We don't want to have one good season and then fade away. We want to build the team back to what it used to be, and that could take time.
Yeah, and it feels like, and it's been pointed this way, and you can tell me if maybe you think you disagree on it, but it feels like the LA Galaxy want to give somebody the time to build something. And I think everybody says that at the beginning of, a tenure, and certainly with Greg Vanney, I think there's going to be a lot of trust there. His success certainly at Toronto has given him the respect and earned that respect to sort of sit there and say, okay, you get some time. The only problem is that we know that time can start to creep up. Yeah, Greg Vanney comes in, and I'm sure, and I don't know the contract details, but I'm sure you're looking at 3+ years. And, similar to what Guillermo Barros-Schelotto did as well. But, that time starts creeping in whenever you're not winning. And so I think Dennis, Teclosa got it the closest, which was, you need to have time to develop things, but you need to win some of that time in order to keep everybody happy, in order to be able to be given the time to construct something. And I wonder if the Galaxy are at the end of their rope enough to understand that this is a building process, that this demands stability, and if they have the right person to be that stable influence, then Greg Vanney you could see Greg Vanney coaching at the LA Galaxy for the next 7 or 8 years. But you have to get through like years 1 and 2 first, though, Kevin.
I think there's a lot of stuff going on here. First of all, Guillermo came in with a great resume, but I don't know how many people really knew him. And by that, I mean knew him beside a couple of conversations and seen him coach. I don't even know that Dennis was that familiar with him. Certainly Chris Klein knew him as a player, but this is a guy that played with, talking about Vanney, this is a guy that played with Klein. This is a guy that anyone around the Galaxy, they know him. They know what he's about. Certainly, again, what he did in Toronto. He has success in MLS. A couple of interesting things, though. Toronto, in the entire time that Vanney was there, they had the highest payroll in MLS by far. So I do think you're going to see the Galaxy start to spend a lot more now. And that was, Tim Leiweke was there helping a little bit, and Vanney came in. And Toronto spent a lot of money to get, Michael Bradley and Josie Altidore, and they had a lot of other players that came through there. So I expect you'll see the Galaxy start to spend. I think that Vanney's going to sort of demand that. That's kind of his MO. So I think that's going to happen. And the Galaxy said that they've never had problems spending if they think they're getting value. And that's kind of the line that Greg took with me in a phone call today. Is it's just not spending for spending's sake. It's spending for what we can get. And I do think that Vanney will have a little bit more. You're right. They do have to win. And Vanney knows that this is the demanding fan base. But I do think that he is going to be given some time and some, more important, the credibility is not the right word, but the belief. I think if he says that he wants to do something, and it sounds a little funny to somebody in the front office, I think that his credentials are going to allow him to do that. The other thing he's going to do now, and nobody would say yes to this, but nobody would say no either, that he's going to be very involved in scouting. And when I talked to Dennis about that, was it just a straight yes or no question? I understand he's going to be involved in scouting. Is that true? And Dennis went on a long answer about needing to know the players. I took that as a yes, but what I came away also believing was that Greg is going to be involved at every level of player development. Remember, he was an academy director at Real Salt Lake. He was academy director at the start in Toronto. The Galaxy have a deep academy system, and Greg talked about that. He talked about that as a tool to build. But I do think he's going to be the guy making some of these off-season trips, to outer wherever, to scout players. Not now with COVID, but when we get back to normal, he's going to be the guy making those trips. Dennis did say they have done quite a bit of work rebuilding their scouting department, and so I would expect that Greg is going to sort of head that up.
Yeah, and it needed to be rebuilt. Whenever Dennis was on our show here at the end of last year, which, by the way, it's 2021 now. I don't know if I said Happy New Year to everybody. I think I missed that part. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year. Change the number on your checks.
Yeah, exactly. I had to write the date today. I'm like, really? 2021? That seems weird. Okay, sure. We're going to go with it. I was excited to be past 2020 for sure. But anyway, when Dennis was on the show at the end of last year, I got to ask some pretty pointed questions, which was good. Part of that was about the scouting and about how they're doing that, and you could tell that Dennis wanted to make changes there, and so I think it's a good sign that they seem to have found someone in Vanney that fits in with what they're trying to do. And with Vanney being a general manager at Toronto, and before he was GM, he also had worked with some very good GMs as well. So you can understand that. I think there's everybody's seeing eye to eye there. Kevin, you mentioned it many times that this seemed like it was, serendipitous, if not full out planned, with Vanney not renewing at Toronto, even though they offered him, the job, or offered him an extension in Toronto. He didn't sign it. I think that was in October, the same time about GBS got fired in that. So when you look at those things and sort of say how this all came about, Greg Vanney seems to want to be in Los Angeles. And I have to imagine that, hey, Toronto seems like a really awesome place. And certainly, what they did up there with the team is great. But in terms of quality of life and quality of living in Southern California and Toronto, I would have to imagine that Southern California wins that. And you talk about a guy who's coming back to a team that he played for. I think all those things combined lead us to believe that Greg Vanney wants to be in Los Angeles. He wants to coach the LA Galaxy. He wants to return them to, the prominence that they had. He understands the pressure. And hopefully, and I think this is a big part, is he understands the culture that is needed and necessary for the LA Galaxy to be a successful team again. And that was one of the things that people hounded on over and over and over again at the end of last season with Dennis DeClosa and Chris Klein.
Well, a lot to chew on there. First of all, have you ever been to Toronto?
Yes, it was a long time ago, but yes, I have been to Toronto. It was in the summertime though. So
amazing place. It's the most cosmopolitan place you can imagine. It is a terrific place for about 3 weeks out of the year, and the rest of the time it's snowing. But it is a remarkable place. And you know what the best part of Toronto is?
What, leaving?
Best part about Toronto? It's in Canada. So, Southern California is a pretty good place too. But Greg did say that he feels like he's coming home. He was born in Virginia and grew up in the Phoenix area in Tempe. So you might have known him when you were going to school there.
Yeah, we were BFFs, I'm sure.
and then he played 1 year in Florida in college, and then 3 years for Ziggy at UCLA, and started with the Galaxy. He said he has not lived any place longer than. He also played 3 years in France, by the way. In his adult life, he hasn't lived any place longer than he's lived in Los Angeles. So he does feel as if he's coming home. He did leave his wife, 4 children. He has a 16-year-old, a 9-year-old, and two twins somewhere in between there. He did leave his wife, 4 kids, and 2 dogs back in Toronto while he sort of gets settled. Monday was actually, he said, his first day in the office. But going back to what you were talking about, I asked him about that because I did think that everything seemed to line up. And Guillermo was fired about the same time Vanney was negotiating a new contract in Toronto. And then suddenly talks fell apart. He told me that it wasn't as done as everyone seemed to think it was. And that the Galaxy were not knocking at his door right away.
Right.
But he did say what really led him to leave Toronto is he thought that he had done everything that he could do there. He led them to the playoffs 5 times in 6 seasons. They almost won the Supporters' Shield again this last season. So he felt like he had the team, set up, and the team was performing well. And the only thing he could do at this point is screw it up. He couldn't make it any better. And he looks at himself and he thinks of himself as a builder, and he was looking for a project. And so when he stepped down at Toronto, he said, I was sincere when I said, I don't know what's next. He said that was true. He said, I wanted to a project. I said, I knew the Galaxy was a project. That didn't mean I was applying for that job at the time. He tells me he didn't really have significant conversations with Dennis until December. But you're right. It's just like a hand fitting a glove. It just was so obvious that these two went together. I have to believe there were some preliminary conversations of some sort, and then maybe it came to Dennis saying, let me look around the rest of the store and make sure there's not anything else I want here before I sign you. But he said his first day in the office was Monday, and that when he did leave Toronto, the Galaxy job had not been offered to him. But it really does kind of seem to be a match made in heaven.
Yeah, it lined up well, and certainly that was the case. But there's more news than just Vanney, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about Vanney and a whole bunch of other things. But there's also some assistant coach news as well. Why don't you tell people about that?
They have hired some assistant coaches.
There you go. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. Wait, hold on. There we go. All right. There's Kevin.
You know why it's really hard to coach a team just by yourself. So they needed some assistants. So they have hired some. And in keeping with this theme, Dan Calichman will be coming back to the Galaxy. He also played on that first team, played on the defensive line. Again, I hate to keep harping on the same thing, but think about the defensive line they had. They had Robin Fraser, who's coached at 2 teams in MLS and been an assistant. They had Dan Calichman, who has been an assistant for 7 years at Toronto and now is coming back to the Galaxy. And then they had Greg Vanney, who is now going to be the Galaxy's manager. So Dan Calichman is coming back. He's going to be apparently the top assistant. And they also are bringing back Jim Liston. He was Toronto's director of sports science for 7 years under Greg. He was a former strength and conditioning coach, both at the Galaxy and Chivas USA and one other MLS team. He is coming back too. Greg could not tell me about any more coaches. He said their contracts have not been finalized yet, but it does sound as if much of the Toronto staff, those are 2 guys from Toronto already coming. He couldn't tell me anything about Dominic Kinnear either. He said that he's only been in LA a day, and he wanted to talk to Dominic face to face about where he might fit in. I did talk to Dennis. Dennis was a little bit more open and said that that Dom is still under contract to the Galaxy, that he thinks he has an awful lot to offer, doesn't know where he might plug into the team, whether it would be in the front office, perhaps in scouting. I don't know about player development. There's still a chance he could wind up on that coaching staff. Although, if Dan Calichman is the top assistant, where does Dom fit in? Does he become the number 2 guy? Does he get some specialized scouting advisory role? I think it would be a slap in the face to make him like the number 2 assistant under Calichman, and that's not really a knock. Because Calichman and Greg Vanney have an awful lot of chemistry together.
Right.
But the Galaxy are all hopeful that Dominic stays somewhere and they can find a place for him. And we've seen that in the past. When Dan Kennedy was quote unquote retired as a goalkeeper, he wound up working in the front office and then went on to do TV stuff. And I think Dan Gargan did that too, if I'm not mistaken. So I think they're going to try to find a home for Dom. They still have to pay him, and I apparently want him to work for that money. I think he has a lot to offer. I would hate to see them just sort of show him the door.
Yeah, I mean, it's you say maybe a slap in the face. Yes, you could take it that way. Every time I think we've sort of looked at Dominic Kinnear and said, well, there's no way he'll do that. He won't become the LA Galaxy's interim manager again because, they've already did it twice and they passed him over twice. I mean, he got passed over for the head coaching job again. I mean, let's be very clear about that. That's what happened. Greg Vanney took it. Dominic Kinnear was up for it. Dominic Kinnear came in with Siggy, stayed along as the interim, then stayed along with Guillermo Barros-Schelotto and was, got passed up for the head coaching job there. And then, now Guillermo gets fired. And so Dominic Kinnear again is the interim again, which we didn't think would happen, and then gets passed up for the head coaching job again. I mean, me personally, not being the evolved person that I think Dominic Kinnear is, I'd be angry already. I'd be like, okay, I'm never going to get this shot. But there's probably way more into that comes. But when you look at putting together, a high quality, a high caliber MLS coaching staff, it's not horrible to say that the more you load that bench with people who know what they're doing really and who get along well and have a good dynamic between everybody, Kevin, the better off you are. I mean, we talked about, and you and I am prepping for this, we talked about, you go back to Bruce and certainly successes he had, having Dave Sarakin on there, having Pat Noonan, having Matt Reese, eventually having, Kenny Arena on there as well. You could go up and down that list and really find, a wealth of talent. I mean, Dave Sarakin could be a head coach in Major League Soccer at any time, and I'm surprised he hasn't been given that job because he's an excellent man manager and I think tactician. And I think he gets overlooked as sort of Bruce's underlings, whereas it's funny. I've dealt now with enough quote unquote administrations with the LA Galaxy that you sort of get the feeling like whenever Dave Sarakin was there, Bruce didn't really want to do podcasts or come on and do interviews. And so he let any of his assistant coaches do whatever they wanted to do. So we used to have Pat Noonan on the show all the time. We used to have Dave Sarakin on the show all the time. And because of that, we got a really good insight into that, front office and what was happening. Siggy Schmidt came along, and I remember I asked for Siggy one time, and they said, Siggy's busy. And I'm like, well, that's cool. I'll talk to Dominic Kinnear. And they're like, well, hold on, we have to get Siggy's okay for you to talk to Dominic. I'm like, but that doesn't make any sense having come from, Arena's sort of time there and the things that happen. It's like, no, you should be able to talk to whoever really you want. And if one guy doesn't want to talk, other people do. So there was that sort of, thing at the Galaxy with Siggy. And then under Guillermo, it's like Dominic Kinnear kind of didn't exist for a large portion of that, even though I think that, had they listened to him a little bit more, that Guillermo might still be the head coach. So you look at all these things in the different ways that coaches handle things. I'm interested to see how Vanney puts it together, with Calichman being his number one, underneath him. Is there room for Dominic Kinnear? And I think if you're a Galaxy fan, you should be screaming, yes, there should be room on that bench. But I'm also wouldn't be surprised at all if Dom, gives him the salute and says, thank you very much.
Well, a couple of things. Dom is in his 50s. He's a soccer lifer. 50s is not over the hill by any means, but it's probably a little too late for him to start selling insurance. So, where is he going to go? And the reason I bring that up is I think Dom he's a soccer lifer and he so loves the game. When you talk to him, the enthusiasm is still there like it was probably when he was an AYSO player, decades ago. He just loves the game. And so where we sit here and talk about, he was disrespected and shown the door, I think Dominic might see it as, oh my God, you're going to pay me to coach a soccer team? I get to be around soccer players. He's probably just loving this. And he's probably thinking, so I don't get to be the number one assistant. I get to be the number two assistant. That's great. I can see a scenario in which Dominic just wants to be on the field. And if you're going to give him a paycheck and he can support his family, he doesn't care what his title is. I can definitely see that happening. I remember when I, way back half a lifetime ago, when I covered the Marlins and Jeffrey Lurie was the owner, and it was a horrible place to be and it was so cheap. And I remember coaches would come and tell me on their way out the door when they were fired or quit what an awful place it was and how terrible it was. And then 2 or 3 years later, that same coach would be back. And I asked him, what are you doing? You hated this place. And he said, there are only 30 big league teams. Right. And, there's only so many jobs. there are more jobs in soccer, but I think maybe part of that is Dominic's thing. If I work at the highest levels of soccer and I want to stay in the United States, I got to kind of do this. So I do feel that Dominic maybe got the short stick a little bit, but I think he'll be okay. I think he actually loves being here. And the other thing you talked about with the different coaches, how Bruce was fine with letting the coaches come on, and how Dave Sarakin was paid a lot of money, and probably as much as a lot of managers, and he was just an assistant, all that kind of stuff. I think with Vanney, it's going to go back to that. I think that Ziggy, was very respectful of the front office, and I think they kept him on a little bit of a short string.
Right.
Guillermo, definitely the same thing. I think there was some limits to what Guillermo and Dennis could really push for. Vanney is from the old school. Vanney is from the old regime. And even though he was only here for a short time under Bruce, when you look at what he did in Toronto, and by the way, he corrected me. He wasn't general manager. He said I was more like a sporting director.
Gotcha.
That there was another general manager. So that fits what he is going to do here. There's not that title. The Galaxy traditionally have not had the title sporting director. But if he's in charge of scouting, he's going to be working with the academy, and he's in charge of the first team, that's closer to a sporting director. And I think Dennis is going to be the GM. But I do think that Vanney comes in with the resume, with the history with the team, having run a big payroll team in Toronto and demanded some things that he got in Toronto. I think he's coming in here. And I don't think he's going to be beholden to Chris Klein and to Jovan, maybe even to Dan Beckerman in a way. I think he's going to come in and say, this is the way I want to do it. And if you want to win, this is the way we're going to do it. And I think he's in a very good position to do that. I think he can definitely point at the last 4 years and said, you guys want to go back to that? Really? You brought me in to fix it. Let me fix it. I need another $15 million in payroll, and let's go.
Yeah, I mean, the other part of that is you talk about Toronto having the highest payroll. In most of those years, the second or third team was the LA Galaxy as well. So again, it's not like the LA Galaxy don't spend money, Kevin. It's just that the players, look at the hits and the misses. Certainly, you even have to go back to Diego Polenta, who didn't stay very long, and that wasn't a loan deal. But you go back to the guys like Michael
Shelvick, Van Dam,
Michael Ciani as well, right?
Ciani.
They missed on the players they paid money for. You can even go to Pipo Gonzalez on this, and you can say, hey, they missed on the players that they were going to spend. That they really invested a large portion of the salary cap in, and that has to stop. I think another thing that, and certainly a topic that has been running rampant through the LA Galaxy, is the loan deals. And I think loan deals get a bad rap right now from the LA Galaxy. But the reason they get a bad rap is the LA Galaxy have always used loan deals to get players, but they have rarely used loan deals to get their designated players. And not having control over your top playmakers is a little bit of a recipe for disaster. And that's why I think the loan deals are getting a bad rap. And we're going to talk about Pavone here in a little bit and sort of where the LA Galaxy are in relation to, that deal and how that sort of plays out, Kevin. But at the same time, the LA Galaxy need to have a core. And a core in Major League Soccer is something of an elusive thing, because what needs to happen with your core is all the players of that core center, maybe 4 or 5 guys, need to keep getting better. And as they keep getting better, they need to be making more and more money. And then almost one person per year in that core you need to get rid of because they're going to make too much money, and you need to fill in with a spot, and sort of do that. And people say, oh no, you keep the core together the whole time. And Bruce got lucky with some of that in terms of controlling the designated players and having 3 designated players making an impact. Right? That's super important in that as well. But the core, there were players that rotated through that. I mean, you can go back to Sean Franklin, you can go back to Todd Donovan, and keeping together some of that core. Eventually, AJ De La Garza, Robbie Rogers, and all those different things that sort of came. They had a central sort of theme of who they were going to keep. But eventually those guys got expensive and they had to rotate somebody out. And Bruce is even going through that, I think, with Diego Fagundes in New England, which was, he was offered a contract. He decided not to sign it. And now, he's a free agent and looking to, I think he's headed to Austin is last I've sort of heard. So, I mean, keep that in mind as Greg Vanney goes through and tries to rebuild this roster and create a core that yes, he's going to try to get people who work together and who can stabilize the LA Galaxy and give them some real talent and some real quality underneath the salary cap. The players that are underneath the salary cap is where you really need to focus on that. But also, and he did this in Toronto as well, rotate people out and find people to plug back in so that way you can continue to be underneath that salary cap. That is I think the hardest thing for anybody to do in Major League Soccer is understand there's turnover every single year because of the salary cap. It's how you replace those people.
Well, and what he said in regards of the salary, and you're right about the Galaxy were, second and third, and Toronto was spent a lot. But, his argument to me today on the phone wasn't that they just threw money at the problem. He said, you have to go out and spend. When you go out and spend, whether it's a lot of money or not a lot of money, he said that the players you buy have to be able to fit together. He said, especially your DPs, they have to go out and perform, and then you need to find complementary pieces with the talent players you have. And so he said there's no one player that wins games in this league anymore. There's no three players who win games anymore. Obviously, he's referring to DPs there. There's no three players who win games in the league anymore. You have to have a good team. You have to have depth, and you have to have a minimum of 16, 17 quality players that can help get you through the tough stretches. So he's talking about spending money, but he's talking about spending money in a way that makes sense, where things fit together. And I think you can make the argument going back to the final Bruce Arena years about 2015, where they bring in Steven Gerrard for a lot of money and even Gio Dos Santos for a lot of money. Players that didn't really fit in with the way Bruce wanted to play and with the players that he had. Those guys didn't really fit in. Then you go out and get Ola Kamara, and then you bring in Zlatan. All of a sudden, he doesn't fit in anymore. So I think Greg wants to be much more strategic with how he spends. It's not just how much you spend, but how you spend it.
Yeah, and that should always be. I wonder what he thinks, just in terms of even saying, you need to get your three, it's not even just three players playing together. Well, I wonder what he thinks of the LA Galaxy designated players, because I would have to imagine that with Chicharito in last year, that's a disappointment. And knowing you're coming in and having to coach Chicharito up in order to be a productive member of, the team this year, and then having to deal with Jonathan Dos Santos as well, who was a disappointment in 2020 as well. I mean, really outside of Christian Pavone, and Pavone is not on the roster, and there's no good way forward in terms of we can't predict whether or not he will be on this roster. I mean, maybe Vanney isn't that high on Pavone because he knows he has an open designated player spot and he could go out and get somebody who he thinks he needs in order to fill in for some of these guys. If they get Pavone back, it's interesting to sort of play that game because the LA Galaxy's three designated players are locked in. There's no chance to either change how they play or add any complementing pieces. And if he's hammering on the complementary pieces part, I would have to imagine you look at the LA Galaxy, Kevin, and you say, there are some complementary pieces here that aren't working. They're not complementary. And how he goes about sort of trying to construct and fix that.
Well, he's always played a 4-3-2-1 in Toronto. That would mean Chicharito as the single striker, and we've talked about how that probably doesn't work. So it'd be interesting to see, whether he changes that. But look where he spent his designated player money. He spent a lot of money on Michael Bradley, who's the midfielder who kind of runs things, more of a defensive midfielder most of the time, and then he had Josie Altidore, a striker. He did spend his money, strategically in places where he thought he needed help. And you can, it's kind of interesting to take his formation and the players he had in Toronto and then look at how they would work here. Does that make, does Jonathan Dos Santos then become the Michael Bradley over here? And
right.
Is Chicharito the Josie Altidore? How does it all fit together?
Yeah, I mean, the pieces aren't horrible for him, certainly. And putting together a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-2-1, however you really want to look at that. I mean, it's basically a 4-3-3 whenever we get down to it, which is a lot of what Guillermo sort of, intimated in his lineups. But having a 1 up top with Chicharito is probably still, the way it's going to work for him. I just think that, you look at Josie Altidore compared to Chicharito, and those are two different playing styles, right? Josie can hold the ball up, is physical. Chicharito isn't that guy. And so how Vanney sort of goes about and brings Chicharito into this game plan, which is something that Guillermo failed to do, and was something I think Dominic Kinnear did a little bit better, but still wasn't perfect. So all of those things that you're looking at, it's going to be interesting to see how Vanney sort of tries to, mold this in a direction. And in year one, he has to have some success. I mean, he's going to get a little bit of a free pass, but I'll tell you right now, Galaxy fans are not into that free pass for more than maybe half a season. And who knows what kind of season we're even going to see from Major League Soccer again in 2021. So it could be another crazy one in terms of how the games are played, the shortness of the season. I don't know if we talked about this, but with the MLS Players Union being notified that the MLS owners are enforcing the force majeure, basically means that for the third time in 12 months, Major League Soccer and the Players Union will be negotiating a collective bargaining agreement again. So we don't even know how that affects things right now, because the players sort of indicated pretty early on that doing that would be a mistake, and perhaps we're going for a work stoppage. Maybe it'll be a lockout. Maybe it'll be a strike. One of those things certainly, one or both of those things could certainly happen. But trying to do that in year one, I mean, I think Galaxy fans are going to expect that, yes, Greg Vanney has to rebuild. Yes, he has to do things, but winning still needs to happen during that rebuild. And that's going to be tough right now.
Well, we talked a lot about that whole uncertainty. And first of all, going back to the labor union, they have 30 days by law. They have 30 days to decide whether or not they're going to negotiate in good faith over a new collective bargaining agreement. And then after those 30 days, then something has to happen. Either they decide that they're at an impasse and there could be a work stoppage, then they decide they want to continue negotiating, whatever it is. The fact that it started in December means that that 30 days will be up by the end of January. Which would be the traditional date for training camp to start. So that does give both sides some time to work out.
Yeah. I mean, it does. It does give people time to work out. Doing just trying to figure those things out. And MLS even came out, recently. I think it was today, and put together sort of the dates for the important schedule. Kevin. And so they were sort of saying, hey, these are the important dates that are coming in. And granted, they had, NWSL dates in there and NCAA dates in there. But in that, they mentioned that you're looking at some dates that are coming up in terms of Major League Soccer and training camp starting basically, at the end of January type of thing. And then also looking at, a league that starts at the beginning of March. I mean, they said tentative in both of those cases, but at the same time, the clock is counting. It's January 4th. We are right on top of everything in terms of how this league is going and how things are headed in that direction. And so I would expect that, you're running out of days here, because by the end of January, things are supposed to start happening in terms of training camps.
Well, I talked to Greg about that and said, right now they have 17 players on the roster. They don't have a goalkeeper that's played a game in MLS, so they need to resolve that. They don't know the Pavone situation. There are a lot of questions. And Greg said that they are going to act on the assumption that training camp is going to start in January and try to have things in hand by then. And then if they get more time, if this thing is drawn out a little bit, then they'll have time to actually, take longer looks at players, is what he said, and to spend a little bit more time scouting players and getting a feel of what they're doing. So they look at a delay as not necessarily a bad thing for the Galaxy, since they are now, less than a month away from what would traditionally be the start of training camp. What MLS is looking at, and first of all, back to the players thing, the players are angry, and they were angry last June when they were forced to accept a collective bargaining agreement and go to the MLS's back tournament. They felt like they had good negotiations over the first CBA with ownership. They felt like Don Garber forced them to go play in the MLS's back tournament, and the players took pay cuts. So did the league. The players took pay cuts. There were a lot. They were the ones in quarantine. Don Garber wasn't in quarantine for 35 days or whatever. 1 out of every 5 players tested positive for COVID last year. I don't know how much that's been reported. A number of teams had, huge outbreaks, like Colorado. The players felt like they gave more than just blood, sweat, and tears. That in some cases they gave their health last year, and they feel like by forcing these new CBA negotiations that management did not appreciate that. And I do think that they're going to dig in a little bit. And what will MLS do then? Will it go out and play college players? They may not have a season. Maybe they'll be eligible to play.
Right.
What do they do? So it's interesting. And MLS has some decisions to make about when the season starts. If they start on time, they're not going to have that fixture crunch at the end when, there's going to be 8 World Cup qualifiers between September and November. That's right at the end of the MLS season, traditionally in the playoffs. Are they going to try to play through that? That's something that they have to think about, not just with the U.S. national team, which is European heavy now, but, Honduras and Mexico to an extent, Costa Rica, Trinidad. A lot of these teams have players that will be leaving for World Cup qualifiers. Does MLS want to start now to avoid that, or does MLS wait because they took $1 billion bath and the majority of their revenue comes from game day receipts? Do they want to wait and maybe try to start the season in April or even June with fans in the stands? Maybe they play another 24-game season or 23-game season. They have a lot of decisions to make. Anyone who thinks that they know that the MLS season is going to open on time and how it's going to unfold, I think they're fooling themselves. I don't even think MLS has the slightest idea right now what's happening.
Yeah, by the way, we should put in quotation marks $1 billion bath. All right, because that's a very round number for it to be.
What they did is they said projected revenue. So
yes.
you could project we were going to get $1 billion for our MLS Cup final on Univision and just project that and say we lost it. I think that's another issue the union has too. I think when these talks heat up, one of the things you're going to say is show us where you lost $1 billion, because the English Premier League was not projecting losses like that. Yeah,
except they have a larger TV deal. So I mean, I can start arguing on both sides of this, and I understand. I think from both sides, what this is all going to take. So, but yeah, that's an interesting part. So you're going to put in Greg Vanney. As much as we tried, and I think people tried to give Guillermo Barros-Schelotto a little bit of a pass because he was coaching, during the COVID season and how everything was, sort of crazy. I don't think Vanney's going to get the same amount of time, only because we've now been at this almost a year. It's just, again, the results are going to matter, and I think they're going to matter a lot sooner than people really always say they're going to matter. Outside of the first 3 or 4 games, I have a feeling the Galaxy fans will be pretty impatient with how much the losing has been affecting them in 2020, and to start 2021 that way. As well will be difficult for them to weather, I think. So anyway, yeah.
Well, one other thing I wanted to add, going back to something you said earlier about when you talked about constructing teams, and we talked about the pieces fitting together. Way back at the start of this 2020 season, before everything went crazy, I did a story on David Beckham's first season and first game because, he was owner of Inter Miami. And Tim Lewicki told me, we brought in Beckham and we put him on a team with Landon Donovan, and everyone thought, oh, this is great. And here's 2 of the best player in the United States and one of the best players in Europe, and it's going to be a great team. And Lewicki said, we knew that this was not going to be a winning team. And in fact, 2007, 2008, they were terrible. He said, when we became a good team and when they won their first MLS Cup was when they brought Robbie Keane in. And he said, because you look at it and Beckham's a midfielder. He's not going to score a lot of goals. He's going to set up a lot of goals. Who's he going to set up? Well, he wound up setting up Robbie Keane. So putting that team together and having those pieces fit together is why I go back and say, it didn't make any sense to bring in Gio. It didn't make any sense to bring in Gerard. That's not what they needed at that point. And so it's the way that the pieces fit together that's really important. And another thing about Greg, you talk about whether or not there's a honeymoon period. This is an important hire, and here's why. You could say that Kurt and Offel, they were going in a different direction and it didn't work out. Okay, fine. And, you can argue about that. Then Ziggy came in sort of as let's get back to normal. Let's stop the bleeding. I don't think Ziggy was supposed to reinvent soccer with the Galaxy. I do think he was a let's stop the bleeding kind of hire. That didn't totally work out. Guillermo was kind of the guy they wanted. That's who Dennis wanted. That's why he didn't hire Porter. And that didn't work out. The one thing I think that changes now with Greg Vanney is he is who they want. He has all the things. He has success in MLS. He understands the Galaxy history. He understands Southern California. He knows the fan base. He knows AEG. He is the one guy that is unassailable in a lot of ways. If this doesn't work out and you talk about the pressure will be on him, yeah, maybe. But I think the pressure is on the front office because we've been talking about you changed the coach 4 times in 4 years. You changed 66 players. And the one thing that remains the same, well, 2 things remain the same. One, the front office remains the same and losing remains the same. So if you've changed all the players and you've changed the coaches and you've changed the style of play, but you haven't changed the front office and you're still losing, it's pretty easy to figure out where the problem is. And I think now Vanney answers that question. If they continue to struggle under Greg Vanney, then it's obvious where the problem is if it wasn't obvious before. And the front office is going to have to look at itself and say, maybe where the change has to come.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, right, as of right now, we're not expecting any other changes within the structure of the front office. Would that be fair, at least right now?
On Monday night, yeah, but by the time this runs on Tuesday morning, it could be different. I'm not expecting any front office changes. There was to be an announcement Tuesday morning before we're recording this that there could be some other changes. I expect it's probably the announcement of Calichman. There are some player signings out there. We know about Jorge Villafana.
Right.
They're not ready to announce that yet. Apparently, as of Monday night, the team and Villafana's agent were not ready to confirm that. We know that it's going to happen. It's just not done yet. And I don't know what is holding it up, contractual language. Perhaps maybe Villafana doesn't want to sign until he finds out if there's going to be a season. Maybe there's something to do with trying to negotiate a contract without a pay cut in case of COVID. It could be language in the contract. There are likely to be other signings. As we mentioned, they do not have a goalkeeper with MLS experience.
Right.
David Bingham can be re-signed, and we know that Jonathan Klinsmann is out there. I understand his contract is pretty rich, and they may be trying to talk him down a little bit.
Right.
Those could be signings coming. There is going to be more news this week. We just don't know if it's going to be, whether the Galaxy consider the coaching staff to be big news, whether it's a player signing or what.
Yeah, there's as I said on Monday morning, because I know everybody was sort of expecting things. I said this week seems like the week that you're going to get some of those announcements that you were waiting for. So just sort of hang tight in there, and I think you're going to get it. One of the things that is still going on, and if you're paying any attention whatsoever, you're seeing it. Pavone and the saga with Boca Juniors. There were reports that Pavone did not report back to Boca, and that upset Boca, and now Boca has not registered him for 2021. Which means that he can't play with the team. And there were some people who were taking that as an indication perhaps that he would be coming back to the LA Galaxy. I think if either of those are true, A doesn't connect with B there. It doesn't necessarily mean any of those things. Other reports are out there that say that Pavone asked for a pay raise from Boca, and Boca didn't like that. I don't know how true that is either. And then there was also reports out today that said, Pavone did take his COVID-19 test, and so as soon as that clears, he'll be able to train with Boca, and so he's expected to be training with Boca, being that he's still their player. I mean, we've sort of gone over all this. We talked about it on the podcast last week. I wrote an article on it as well that still holds true. And Kevin, I know you got to ask a little bit on Pavone today. What's the official line right now, so that way we could tell everybody that basically nothing has changed?
Yeah, as of Monday evening, Dennis is still negotiating with Boca. Doesn't seem to feel like any breakthrough is close, but he's still talking, which means he hasn't given up hope. And I've heard from a lot of different people that Boca can be a very, very difficult team to negotiate with, that they greatly overvalue their players and they greatly undervalue where they're going. So it's sort of like, he's not going to come play for you. Well, in this case, I think Dennis has a good hand to play because reportedly Christian Pavone loved LA and wants to come back. So, I think Dennis sort of has a stronger hand. And I don't know, Pavone was a guy that Arsenal and other teams were looking at and apparently were very high on. But this transfer window is completely out of whack with COVID. The transfer window in Europe is just opening now, and the Premier League is already talking about taking a 2-week COVID break. And they haven't had fans in the stands, 2,000 fans at the most. So they're having financial problems too. If they once thought that Pavone was a $40 million player, or if Boca really thinks he's a $20 million player, they're not going to get that in this environment.
Yeah, it doesn't seem likely. We said that, after December 31st, that he is a Boca player. Boca now has to pay his wages. I think that his return to Boca came with a pay raise already, because I think that Boca has to pay, because of the union rules in Argentina, Boca has to pay, the salary that he was getting at the LA Galaxy, which now makes him one of the higher paid players. And we talked about valuations. Pavone right now is one of the highest value players on that team as well. So paying him the most money at the highest value, if either of those things are hurting Boca, and there has been some people who certainly come out and said that, Boca's not in any financial issues. They don't need to worry about this stuff. For right now, it seems that most teams are in financial problems. And that includes the LA Galaxy, which is why they really need to be smart about Pavone. And I think with Vanney in there and sort of bouncing that off of Dennis and understanding it, I'm not one to say that Pavone wasn't the best player for the LA Galaxy last year. I'm not saying that if Pavone comes back, he's not, a contender for MVP of the league. He should be. He's one of the best players in Major League Soccer, so he should be. But when you're Greg Vanney and you're trying to construct a team, is Christian Pavone where you really need the help? And that's one of the questions that I don't know that I can answer right now. But it's something that Dennis DeClosa and Greg Vanney are going to have to figure out. And eventually dealing with Boca gets tiresome and you don't want to do it anymore. And maybe that means the Galaxy have to walk away because they're not going to overpay. This is one of those where it seems the LA Galaxy, at least sometime, have a clear path to getting Pavone, and that number seems to be anywhere between $8 and $10 million, and anything over that, anything that values the player at more than 10, it feels like the LA Galaxy aren't going to be able to go and aren't going to be able to do. And so, that's just, I think that's realistic right now, understanding the task that's ahead for Vanney and the coaching staff and Dennis as well. Understanding all those things is really why this isn't the easiest decision for them to make, and certainly one where they can't afford to overpay for Christian Pavone. Yeah.
And what do you think about the possibility of Toronto players coming here? We already know that Greg's bringing a lot of his coaching staff. One of the things that coaches do is they bring people that are comfortable. They're comfortable with, whether it's coaches or trainers. In the case of the performance coach now, Bruce Arena, when he came, reached back and got Mike McGee and some others that people thought, "What are you doing?" They were players that he was comfortable with. And you look at what Greg Vanney did in Toronto after he was, in charge. He brought Marky Delgado over from Chivas USA, and now you see he's bringing his coaching staff over to LA. I wonder if he tries to bring some Toronto players over to LA, people that he's comfortable with, that maybe he can get for a good price that would fit a role, something that a position of need here in LA.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the advantages of having somebody who's familiar with MLS and has coached a lot of players too, right? Is that you say, man, I really wish I had a guy like this guy who can fill in at this role. And it's like, well, why don't I just see if that guy's available? And look, he's available, I'll bring him in. I know this guy. I know what he does. I mean, Bruce was famous for that. Siggy did that as well. So, you're sort of like, I know this guy. I know what he can do. You need to bring him back in. So there's certainly something to that. That makes a bunch of sense. One of the players that perhaps we thought, and sort of bringing this show to a little bit of a point here, Kevin, but one of the players we thought was going to come back, or at least had the ability to come back, who was divorcing himself from FC or Inter Miami. I guess we can only call him Inter Miami for so much longer until they lose that lawsuit, and then they have to change their name, which seems like it's actually a possibility if you read up on that. Inter over in Serie A is actually suing in the United States.
As well they should, by the way.
Do you think so? There's plenty of teams named Inter.
Well, I don't know. I guess this is more of a problem I have with MLS. They keep telling us, we're America's league and we do things differently. And this is, the American Soccer League, and we have playoffs. So then why do we call our teams Real Salt Lake and Inter Miami and Sporting Kansas City? There's no, or United. The whole title United came from cities like Manchester, where they had two different teams, and the teams came together to form one team, and they became United. That's why you have Newcastle United and Manchester United. That's where this came from. There's no United in Atlanta and Minnesota. There's no reason to call those teams United. It's just to make it sound European. And so right. Anything that, call it the Miami, I don't know, call
the
it
Marlins,
the Miami South Beaches or something.
Oh, wait.
Whatever.
Yeah. I mean, there's an argument to be made about that. I mean, I think it's funny that whenever you go back and you say, the original teams had American names. One of the original teams is DC United. And so, you can make that argument going back all the way to the start of the league. It's just interesting to sort of put that stuff in there. But anyway, yeah, there is a lawsuit going on. So anyway, at Inter Miami, we know that AJ De La Garza was leaving Inter Miami, and there was definitely, I think, some hope. And I would think that there was interest, at least from either the player or from the LA Galaxy, to have AJ De La Garza come back to the LA Galaxy. But the reports out and news that broke today was that AJ De La Garza is going to, guess what, New England, where he rejoins with Bruce Arena, which makes 100 and 10% sense whenever you're thinking about where he could possibly go. I thought maybe the LA Galaxy, maybe with Greg Vanney back, maybe that would make some sense, and maybe everybody would sort of get on the same page for that. And the LA Galaxy need a backup right back, and they need that leadership. And we talked about signing Sacha Kljestan and how Sacha Kljestan sort of brings some of that leadership. And if you got AJ De La Garza back as well, apparently Bruce also had that idea of doing that, and so AJ De La Garza looks like he's headed to New England to reunite with Bruce and some of the other coaching staff there.
And that's totally a Bruce move. I mean, we talked about he did that with McGee. He did that with a lot of players. And AJ was a guy that he drafted, out of Maryland and really liked and brought along. And it's just, it makes a lot of sense. I could see AJ maybe sticking around after his playing career. And maybe that's why he did this. He went out and got Greg Berhalter and brought him in and sort of had him become a player coach. And I think Pat Noonan may have been part of one of Bruce's early teams. He brings guys in that he respects and mentors them along and helps them into their post-playing career. And I think AJ may be a guy that's at that point.
Yeah, it certainly seems like that. That could be going that way. But anyway, I think that hurts a little bit for the LA Galaxy, just understanding that the Galaxy really wanted a backup sort of right back that could come in behind Julian Araujo, who could be away on international duty, who might actually get sold. I don't think maybe this winter, but perhaps this summer. And so you need somebody to sort of be in that position that can play that position. I'm sure that Greg Vanney and company are going to be able to figure out and fill in that position. But as of right now, AJ De La Garza is not that guy. And he will be going to New England. So I don't know. I think there's certainly the rumor around that all that ails the LA Galaxy revolves around the untimely departure of AJ De La Garza from the LA Galaxy, and that there's an AJ curse going on and surrounding. This is basically like Babe Ruth, going on with the Boston Red Sox. Kevin, this is almost the same level whenever you really think about it. But AJ,
no, not really.
No, not really. Oh, okay. A little bit of hyperbole.
But it does. The timing does make sense because you remember not only was AJ traded, but he was traded against his wishes when he was told he wasn't going. And what I mean by against his wishes, anyone can trade anybody at any time, but traditionally a guy of AJ's stature, the team goes to them and said, we're thinking of trading you. Is there a place you would like to go? Is there any, do you have any favorite places? They had told AJ exactly the opposite days before they trade him. It was in late January, and they said, you're not going anywhere. You're going to, be at training camp when it opens here, and we're ready to go. And then surprisingly, he got traded with just days to get to Houston before the start of training camp. So if there was a curse, I could see that would be the guy that would bring it. I don't know that I'd call it the curse of the Bambino. We have to come up with another name.
Yeah. Well, the curse of AJ doesn't work for you. Is that what you're saying?
That would be okay, I suppose. I'd like to get a little. I have to think about it. The curse of El Tráfico.
Okay. All right. No, that predates.
It was a year early. Anyways.
Yeah. It didn't work at that at all. So anyway, some interesting stuff certainly going on. With all that, so we'll see it. The other thing that's sort of been popping up, and I don't have any good information on this, but MLS has sort of been hinting at, and I think Adidas came out and sort of said that the return of some third kits. I know, Kevin, you're really hot into the kit talk, but the third kits may be returning to some teams. The LA Galaxy have two famous third kits. In fact, two of the best looking kits the LA Galaxy ever put out were third kits. Even though I don't like one, people continuously rank one of those very high. And then it's the black and gold that certainly came about and was worn by the LA Galaxy as a third kit, which is one of the sharpest that they ever put out. And then there's the LA Flag kit that had the green and the yellow and the red on the shoulders, and I think the silver LA Galaxy logo on it as well. So those were some of the third kits, but all those went away along with sort of the long sleeve shirts. And now apparently Adidas and some select teams are going to be reinstating some of those. I tried to find out if the LA Galaxy were one of those with a third kit. The rumor is I think there's a new primary this year, so a new first kit is going to be coming out. And then there was a new third kit that possibly could be linked to the LA Galaxy, and that third kit possibly could be yellow. At this point, there's a whole bunch of rumors and a whole bunch of different things. But if you think about it, a yellow kit, Kevin, sort of a throwback to the LA Galaxy's first original years. Having some of that yellow, having some of the green in there as well, and then having Greg Vanney as a head coach to sort of complete the throwback with Calichman on the coaching staff. I mean, go find Robin Fraser and you've got yourself an LA Galaxy starters on throwing it back to 96. And you can have a throwback sort of third kit as well. I don't know if any of that's going to happen, but I at least think it's interesting.
I could find Robin Fraser. I have an idea where he is. But yeah, I mean, if they're going to do a third kit and it's select teams, is it going to be the Galaxy or is it going to be Montreal Impact? Come on. The Galaxy always have one of the best-selling kits in the league. Of course, the Galaxy is going to be involved in that unless there's a discussion that maybe a third kit would detract from the great selling numbers they're getting from one of the first two kits. So if they're going to offer it for select teams, the Galaxy got to be one of them. By the way, on this AJ thing, I got an idea. Why don't we start a listener contest where listeners give us their idea of what the name should be for the Curse of AJ, and the winner gets a Zoom date, 30-minute Zoom date with you.
That sounds like a horrible prize. I'll be honest with you. I mean, we could figure something out. Let's not throw out all of our good ideas the first show of 2021. All right. I mean, I want to save some of those ideas, Kevin. As a matter of fact, because it's the first show of 2021, I also wanted to press this button, which I haven't been able to press in a very long time.
Welcome to Panda and Pato's Morning Zoo. Pato, and
Panda.
in the morning. Panda and Pato in the morning.
There we go. I don't know if there's
we did start in the morning. That works.
We did this time. So that does work at least this one.
How about a 30-minute Zoom date with Chicharito?
You'd have to get him to show up to a press conference. I don't know if that works.
Good point.
Oh,
good
wow.
point.
Wow. A little below the belt in 2021? Yes, I think so. And that's probably okay. No, it's going to be interesting. Again, Greg Vanney is head coach. Certainly if this podcast makes the air, it means that Greg Vanney is head coach. I know as we're it's funny, the LA Galaxy, Kevin, while we've been recording this show, put out a video on Twitter that is a hype video, certainly. And they are, I think, understanding what's coming, tomorrow as we're recording this, understanding the announcement's coming tomorrow, it certainly is pointing to the fact. And then Galaxy fans who are eagle-eyed actually find, I think, Greg Vanney in this video. It's only for a split second. It's only for a second. But the Galaxy doing they're pointing to center field on this one, Kevin. They're calling their shot. A little less than 24 hours, or a little less than probably 12 hours, or a little more than 12 hours as we're recording right now, from when they're actually going to announce Greg Vanney. So, hey, they're having fun. They're enjoying it. And I think it's time for LA Galaxy fans who have struggled through this last year. It is a time to look and say there's some hope here. Greg Vanney has the track record. He has the understanding of Major League Soccer. He seems motivated to want to do the job. And I think that's all you can really ask for right now. So
are you surprised? Did this announcement surprise you?
No, of course not. Were you
holding out for Patrick Vieira or somebody?
No. I mean, there's certainly, and I think I could make a good argument that Dominic Kinnear can really match a lot of what Greg Vanney brings, but Greg Vanney was the clear number one in this. It made too much sense, and almost if they didn't sign Greg Vanney, you would ask, if they went a different direction, Kevin, you would want to slap him on the back of the head and say, really? It was so easy, and all you had to do was pull the trigger on it. It was the right move to get Greg Vanney, and you couldn't pull that trigger, but they did. And so I don't know that there is much criticism that you can level here at them. I think some people think it took too long, but I think it played out in almost the exact timeline that they expected it to.
I think they had to make it at least make it look like they were checking everything out, checking out other options, and they probably did. But another thing, with Porter not getting the job in LA and going to Columbus and winning MLS Cup 2 years later, in the back of somebody's mind had to be the thought, look, if we don't take Greg Vanney, he's going to Atlanta or DC United or somewhere, and if he has success, then we're double schmucks. So they really had to. They had to worry. I think they had to worry about that. If we don't take this guy, if we take a flyer on somebody else, Dominic, and it doesn't work out, and Vanney went somewhere else, that's going to make us look even worse.
Yeah, there's some of that. All right, we have a live show coming. Yes, what? You had one more thing?
One more thing. I was going to say, Soccer Diva is probably going to be really upset. It wasn't Arsene Wenger though.
Well, yes, it was not arson. I don't. There's, that would have been fun. I would have enjoyed it. But anyway, there's some hopes here that with Greg Vanney being a little more open than maybe some of the other coaches, that perhaps he'll be on this podcast. So we will work on that. We'll see what we can do, and hopefully we'll have Greg Vanney on a podcast. Usually at the beginning of their tenure is the time to do it, because they want to sort of lay everything out, and let everybody know what's going on, and they want to be as nice as possible. So maybe this is the time. So we'll do our best work to try to do it. Kevin will someday get a water bottle that doesn't have a screw top on it, so that way we don't have to listen to it.
Never going to happen.
We don't have to listen to it throughout the entire podcast. But he doesn't have a squeaky chair anymore. I don't know what else everybody wants me to do on this. And you got upgraded internet. I did. We've made strides, Kevin. Yes, we've made strides, Kevin. So I don't think I can give you too much credit. If
Greg Vanney comes on the show, at least with you and I, he's going back to Toronto the next morning.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. All right, we will have a live show coming up on Thursday, our first live show of 2021. I believe the Hammer is all set for that one. So Eric the Portuguese Hammer and I will be back on Thursday night, live show, YouTube, at about 8 p.m. is when that will start, as long as everything goes the way we expect it to. And other than that, I think that about does it. Kevin, is there possibly anything else that you want to get to, or are we good?
Fingers crossed. I don't know what this other news is on Tuesday morning. I hope it doesn't, it isn't bigger than Greg Vanney.
Well, it's going to be.
Could it be?
They renamed the LA Galaxy. They're renaming it, and they're moving to North Dakota. I mean,
maybe it's something to do with Cosmo.
It better not. What else? Only bad things can happen if they announce something on Cosmo. So anyway, all right. If you're looking for Mr. Kevin Baxter on Twitter, it's at KBaxter11. And please head on over to LATimes.com for all of his information. He has an article about Greg Vanney. What do you know? Go check it out, LATimes.com. And we'll continue to bring you all the news and information. It seems like there is going to be possibly a team press conference that's coming up, or at least a Zoom call. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for that as well. And we'll get you all ready. Again, live show on Thursday. A lot to talk about. All right, for Mr. Kevin the Panda Baxter, I'm Josh Pato Guesman, and you've been listening to Corner of the Galaxy from the Box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. Have a great one, everybody.
You've been listening to the Corner of the Galaxy podcast on cornerofthegalaxy.com. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Galaxy Podcast. And be sure to check out and subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook by searching for Corner of the Galaxy. Fans, we thank you for listening, and we ask that you be kind and courteous to your neighbors as you leave the podcast. We thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm Michael Araujo, and on behalf of the entire Corner of the Galaxy crew, goodbye, everybody.